Peter Anastasiou got his start in big pharma with the likes of Lilly and BMS, but before too long, he followed the siren song of biotech and never looked back. I'm Matt Pillar. This is the Business of Biotech JPM 2025 edition, and I'm here with Peter, who is now CEO at Capsida Biotherapeutics. Peter had a few stops along the way, and those stops are on the agenda for our talk about the lead up to his tenure at Capsida and how he's navigating the ebbs and flows of the gene therapy space. Peter, it's great to see you again.
Nice seeing you too. Thanks, man.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time out of a very busy week to spend with the Business of Biotech.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, so I want to start with you and get a little bit of background on where you came from and what you've done prior to Capsida. You got your start, like I said, in big pharma and in sales and marketing. So tell us a little bit about that, and tell us about when you sort of moved from sales and marketing and transitioned into a management role.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, I had a fairly traditional start to my career, big pharma, Lilly and BMS. I was Lilly 12 years, BMS 3 years, and started always on the commercial side of things. But even when I was in commercial in most of that time at Lilly and all of the time at BMS, I was really embedded in working cross-functionally with R&D. At Lilly, I was embedded into a drug development team that was focused on coming up with a successor for Prozac. Prozac was the biggest drug for Lilly at the time. So we had this, it was like a Manhattan Project to get a successor to the important franchise that was already created. So I got a deep exposure to drug development, even though I represented the commercial function by being embedded in that team. And I saw the value of what we were doing in terms of commercializing product was only possible if we had products to commercialize. So the discovery team, all the preclinical work that was going on, the clinical work, certainly regulatory, is what enabled us to ultimately commercialize those products. And so I had a desire as my career progressed to want to be involved more broadly in drug development and later commercialization, and not just commercialization.
Mm-hmm. Were you, I imagine that having that experience in commercialization, the allure of building is great.
Yeah.
But when you do that, you sort of give up the rush and excitement and adrenaline and of success, right? Of commercialization. Was there any kind of push-pull going on there? Or?
No, because there's a different level of adrenaline. And, so as I moved later on in my career to, even being more involved in drug development and eventually overseeing all the operations for later when I was at Lundbeck in North America, there was a different level of enthusiasm and adrenaline. Every time a study would be unblinded and looking at the study results, or even, making the shift from phase 2 to phase 3, and how do you design, a phase 3 program that captures all the important elements of phase 2 and not makes a lot of changes, because obviously the more changes you make, the more risk you take that the phase 3 won't repeat. But at the same time, you learn things from phase 2. So it's that knife's edge of how do you, make the necessary changes without making too many. So there were always these sources of adrenaline, excitement, enthusiasm, regulatory, the negotiating labels with the FDA, and what, can you get into the label, which then enables you to tell your story commercially. All of those things were different levels of a rush.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, all the stuff that we do is to get a medicine to patients. And so there's a lot of those points that create a lot of enthusiasm, sometimes some tears. There's a lot of failures along the way, but it hooked me, all of that.
Yeah. So what was Lundbeck the first stop post big pharma?
No, so I was at, after BMS, I actually joined a med tech startup. That was my first entrepreneurial experience. Mm-hmm. So it's not quite biotech, but very similar, venture backed, cash strapped, having to do things on a shoestring budget. But we developed a product, first of its kind in the CNS space, got it FDA approved, and then launched it. So, being part of that whole journey. And then at Lundbeck, Lundbeck is a 100-year-old company, but in the US, Lundbeck didn't have any presence. They had always sold their products through other companies, primarily Forest Pharmaceuticals. So I got joined as part of their concerted effort to build out into the US. So at first I came on board to be the head of a business unit, to create a business unit actually from scratch, which we did. Then became the chief commercial officer across all the commercial functions and all the products, and then became the president of US and then later North American operations.
Yeah. So, we're going to get into, some of the more scrappy kind of entrepreneurial experiences, but did Lundbeck set you up for what was to come, or do you feel like, I was just kind of curious about how well resourced, being an old company, established company overseas, how well resourced you were here in the States?
It was very similar to like a biotech. I mean, we were setting up things from scratch, setting up processes, setting up systems, SOPs, and building things from scratch. And, the way I think about it is we had one venture investor, and that venture investor was the headquarters in Copenhagen that funded our build out in the US. We had to deliver for the investors. We had to report back to the investors. So it was a very similar experience of going from, very little, kind of a little bit of an embryo, and then growing and building, and the growing pains that come from that. And all of that has been applicable to the kind of stuff that we're doing at Capsida. And so that's, I love that experience, and I wanted to get back to that an experience like that, which is ultimately what drove me to Capsida.
Yeah. So Lundbeck didn't necessarily feel like it came with a safety net.
No, well, not necessarily. I mean, we had investors that expected us to perform, and those investors were the headquarters. And so anytime we had a company we wanted to buy, a partnership we wanted to do, if we wanted to do a DTC campaign, which is a huge investment, all that had to be aligned with, the main investor back in Copenhagen. Yeah. So a lot of parallels and similarities that I really learned from, and that I apply every day in what I'm doing at Capsida.
Yeah. Did you go from Lundbeck directly to Capsida?
I did.
Okay. And you've been there for 3 years now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what have you observed in that time that you've been at the helm at Capsida in terms of sort of the macroeconomic environment that you've dealt with? I mean, you can draw your own assumptions. You think about the past 3 years in biotech, but tell us about it, firsthand perspective.
Yeah, it's really interesting. My timing, not for Capsida. Capsida has been great, but for the macro environment, my timing couldn't have been worse. I was joining Capsida January 2022, right off of 2021, which was the best year in biotech ever, arguably. The fundraising environment was great. The investments people were making, the progress that people were appreciating, investors were appreciating because of the COVID pandemic, our industry and what we do, and we're willing to put money behind it.
Right.
And then that kind of came to a screeching halt in 2022, right around the time I was joining Capsida. So that was a challenge to deal with. And we navigated through it very successfully. And a big part of the way we navigated through it is we have great investors in Westlake and Burson, great support and great guidance that they give us, but also we embarked on a partnering effort. And so throughout 2022, we talked to a lot of companies, but all ended up towards the end of 22 and beginning of 23, consummating new partnership relationships with Lilly, and then an expanded partnership with AbbVie. And so those were great validation of the work we do, but also were an important source of capital for us to not only support their programs that we just partnered on, but also the other work we were doing in terms of building capabilities and moving our own programs forward.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about, and what you can share about how you established those partnerships, like what mechanisms went into making those partnerships happen.
Yeah, well, I think it all starts with having something that people want, and that comes from solving challenges that exist. So we're in the genetic medicine space, specifically gene therapy, and gene therapy has had so much promise and some really good successes with like Zolgensma and Elvetis with and DMD with Sarepta, but also had a lot of challenges too. Some safety issues, some underperformance issues in terms of efficacy, but also commercial performance. And so what we do is we exist to solve the challenges that many of those first generation gene therapies faced. And so the partnering effort really is by starting by having a solution to a problem that exists. And so specifically what we focus in on is delivery. So, a lot of these gene therapies are using naturally occurring viruses like wild type, like AAV9. And for certain tissue targets, that's great. Like if you're targeting the liver, you inject it in the IV and most of it accumulates in the liver. So that's no problem. But for other targets like the brain, where there's biological barrier, like the blood-brain barrier, it's really tough to get to the brain. And so what we do is we engineer capsids. We take those viruses, we engineer them to be able to cross the blood-brain barrier. And we're not just CNS focused, those are our lead programs, but any tissue that has a biological barrier, which most do. So getting tropism to where you want to go, and at the same time engineering them to not accumulate where you don't want it to go. And in this instance, the liver. So, and as a result of that, we're able to deliver IV. So it all starts with the solution that we're offering to the problems of first generation gene therapies that a lot of these pharma companies have had. So that's what enabled us to get a lot of meetings. We kicked off at this meeting, JP Morgan 2022, a partnering process. And it was because of that solution that we have that we were able to get those meetings. We showed them the progress we were making. We have a great CBO who has great relationships and managed a beautiful process. And that's how we ended up having not just one partnership, but two that came out of that effort in 2022.
Yeah. All right. So without getting too propeller head on me, can you talk a little bit about the engineering that enables this? Because, there've been, it seems like for years, there's been discussion around, outside the liver, right?
Yeah.
So can you share with us just a little bit on sort of the fundamentals, I guess, of that?
Yeah, in a very high level way. So the technology that we're based on comes from Caltech. There's a woman named Viviana Bradinaru who has a lab in Caltech. Two of the people in her lab, Nick Flintanis and Nick Godin, together we call them the Nicks. So I may refer to them as the Nicks during this call. The three of them are the scientific co-founders. And what they did was they take that virus and manipulate the amino acid sequence on the surface of the capsid. And that creates literally billions of variants. By doing that, manipulation, it used directed evolution to create billions of capsid variants. And then what we have built is a screening process using robotics and that automation that can filter and screen, all the different NHP tissues. The important part is we're doing all our work in NHPs and in human cells, not just in mice. And so we go from the billions of capsids down to thousands of capsids, down to dozens of capsids, down to the one that has the criteria we're looking for each disease. So for every disease, you set out in advance almost like a target product profile, like you would for, let's say, a clinical stage product. Here we create what's called the target capsid profile and say, okay, if we want to get to Parkinson's, here's the cells we need to impact. Here's the brain regions we need to get to. And so we set up that criteria in advance, and that filtering process, screening process, allows us to get down and identify that capsid. So that's, hopefully that wasn't too rotor head.
No offense to the propeller head.
Yeah, propeller head.
No, that's great.
But hopefully that explains the secret sauce. And so that is our platform. But that platform has been productive, and now that platform has created assets that are on the cusp of going to the clinic and helping to treat patients that have our target diseases.
Yeah. Then that process, is it a very time-consuming process?
It started, it's almost like, I'm not in the software world, but, they say that once you have your first software, every successive version goes quicker. The turnaround time is quicker. It's the same sort of thing. So the first time we did it took a little longer, and every single time that process has shrunk down now to the point where it's, in the weeks and not months.
Yeah. That's a ML AI enabled process, I'm assuming?
No. No, it's mostly robotics and automation enabled.
Yeah.
For us, certainly AI and all of that has great promise in our industry. But for what we're doing biological screening, we think is the best way to get the end result that we're looking for versus modeling it or, AI and silico approaches.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about the macroeconomic environment in 22. And I mean, if you're able to pull through that, you've got a leg to stand on, there's a foundation. And then in this field of genetic medicine, there is a microeconomic environment. And on any given day, don't ask me what investors are thinking, the partner you're looking for. But you've got to differentiate, right? You've got to create something that keeps genetic medicine in the, therapeutic du jour. Tell me about that. Like, what's that been for you? And what levers and buttons do you have control over to navigate that?
Yeah, I think everybody understands the potential of gene therapies and genetic medicines more broadly. And we've seen some of those successes, but we've also seen a lot of failures. And so I do think genetic medicines in some ways have fallen out of favor in the marketplace. And people are certainly excited about things like obesity and immunology. But we exist to solve the challenges that led to this falling out of favor. So I think what's fallen out of favor is some of those generation 1 therapies that are using, AAV9 and can't be delivered IV without accumulating the liver, or you have to do direct brain injection. And so all the things that have made genetic medicines, at least in our space and gene therapy, fall out of favor is why we exist, to solve those challenges. So sometimes it's a little frustrating that we get swept up in, that broad view. But the important part is that the progress that we're making, and it's tangible progress, I think will certainly help continue to differentiate us out of the pack of, the group that has kind of been a little bit laggards. But I also hope we're going to be at the forefront or the tip of the spear of helping bring a new set of enthusiasm and a new era of enthusiasm to what we're doing.
Yeah. I get the sense that some of the enthusiasm around cell and gene therapies, both cell and gene therapies, some of that enthusiasm gets quelled by the complexity of manufacturing, supply chain, last mile supply chain, if you will, delivery to patients. Big challenges there. How does Capsida approach or address some of those kind of back end challenges?
That's a super important point. So in addition to, what I was describing about our differentiation around capsid engineering and getting to where you want to go and not going to where you don't want to go, one of the other challenges that has set back a lot of gene therapies is quality of manufacturing. And so thanks to our investors, again, Westlake and Versant, who understood that and were willing to make an investment in our own manufacturing facility. So we have a 15,000 square foot manufacturing facility that's in our same building where our research labs are in Thousand Oaks. And so we have complete control over timelines, cost, quality through that manufacturing facility. And on top of that, we build in manufacturing screening. Remember that screening process that I talked about, going from the billions down to the 1? Not only are we looking in that screening process for capsids that meet the profile that we're looking for, but we're also looking for capsids that are manufacturable, at least in as much quantity and scale and ease as AAV9. So that's one of the early screens that we do to help us select the capsid, and that wouldn't be possible if we were using a CDMO or if we didn't have that capability. We would, and I'm sure there's great CDMOs out there, no criticism, but you lose control. And anytime you do a tech transfer, you introduce risks, and you can't have the screening as early in the process as you would like, and you don't have that collaboration of being in the same building between the research team and the manufacturing team. For all those reasons, we made the decision to invest in that facility, and it's been a wonderful decision. And not only has it enabled our programs, but quite frankly, we're enabling our partners' programs. So I mentioned the partnerships that we have with AbbVie and Lilly. We also have a partnership with CRISPR and Sally. But we just got an option, as an example, opt-in for one of the lead programs from the AbbVie collaboration in neurodegeneration. We are going to be the manufacturer for that program. So that's great validation. But not only did that building that facility enable our programs, but it's enabling the AbbVie program to go forward. We have a relationship with a sister portfolio company in the Westlake and Versant portfolio called Capsida Therapeutics. And they don't have a manufacturing facility, and we do. So we created a relationship in 2023 where we would be a manufacturer for them. Novartis bought them, and now they're a Novartis company, and they're going to continue to use us as the manufacturer. So that capability has been gold for Capsida, but it's proving to be that for the AbbVie program and hopefully other programs from AbbVie, and for these now Novartis programs.
Yeah. Did that manufacturing facility come online under your watch, or did that?
It was built. It came online just as I was joining.
Yeah.
So I joined in January of 2022, and that's when it was coming online. But the decision to make that investment was made just prior to when about a year prior to when I came, and the great manufacturing team that we had built that out.
Our friends at Alston & Bird set us up with some amazing space to record during JPM week. The firm's national healthcare and life sciences practice has more than 100 attorneys actively involved in the healthcare industry across the full spectrum of legal disciplines. The signature strength of this practice is its ability to master complex representations that draw on the coordinated expertise of its regulatory, compliance, public policy, transactional, corporate governance, securities, FDA, biotech, IP, government investigations, and litigation practice areas. Alston & Bird represents life sciences companies and their partners in corporate stages, ranging from private to newly public to well-established, and in a variety of stages of product development from preclinical to post-approval commercial launch. Learn more at alston.com and tell them you learned about them on the Business of Biotech.
Do you have any insight into what kind of a heavy lift it took to convince investors that manufacturing in-house is the way to go?
It was not cheap. I certainly won't quote what it is that it costs, but I've certainly heard the discussions with our investors and with our team. And it was expensive, but it was worth it for all the reasons that I mentioned. It would be way more expensive if we had all the reasons that you even brought up. The question is, if we had these great programs and they weren't manufacturable in the right scale or quantity, and we had to then go to another CDMO and do a tech transfer, and then, a delay in our programs, or, hopefully, not having any quality issues, or the FDA shutting you down because of your quality issues, would have been way more expensive than making that initial investment.
Yeah.
And we have, like I said, we have great investors that had enough wisdom and willingness to make that investment. And thankful that they did.
Yeah. The previous episode to this one was with Stefan Scher from 3T.
Yeah. So we have a common investor in Westlake.
Right. Yep. Yeah. He spent some time there, I believe. In fact, that discussion sort of centered around the shape shifting that an R&D focused company moving into the clinic has to endure, or the decision making that a CEO needs to make around personnel and where resources are allocated. Obviously, they are not manufacturing in-house, but I would imagine that would be a pretty big sort of shape shift, not only to do in the first place, but to maintain. So 3 years in now as CEO, tell me about how you're maintaining expertise, qualification, momentum in that manufacturing facility.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we have a great team that's super experienced. They've been making biologics for literally a lot of them, 30 years. Super experienced team. And they're committed to our cause and our mission. They're a really great team that a lot of them have worked together for a long time and kind of came over as a team. And they've been great for the rest of the organization as well in terms of culture. And so they're pretty self-motivated. But yes, of course, there's a few, pivots that you make. You kind of pivot from being a platform to having assets, from having assets to getting them into the clinic, which that's the stage we're at, and going from, let's say, on the manufacturing side, kind of vector production, small scale for animal experience, to then, expanding to suspension, broad-based manufacturing for humans, and it's different quality level of specifications. And so all those have been super exciting pivots that we've made successfully up until this point. And the next and most important pivot we're making is filing INDs, which we'll do here in the first half of the year, 2 INDs, one for our program in developmental and epileptic encephalopathy, caused by a specific mutation, by the STXBP1 mutation, and then a Parkinson's program caused by GBA mutations. Both of those, knock on wood, will be submitted and approved INDs in the first half of the year, and hopefully we'll be treating our first patients in Q3 for both programs. So all of those have been exciting evolutions, next steps, that at the end of the day, one of the things that that we've talked about is the great science that we have isn't just for science sake. We're not an academic institution. We created this science so that it helps in the service of patients.
Yeah.
And so that's also been kind of a North Star for all of us, whether it be the research team, manufacturing team, certainly the clinical team, why all of us are here.
Yeah.
And so it's a really exciting time for us making that big
Will
pivot.
that manufacturing facility support clinical trial supply?
GMP.
Yeah.
We just finished the GMP manufacturing for our first program, the STXBP1 program, and we're in the middle of finalizing our GMP for the Parkinson's program. And so that is at the FDA's quality specs. We've had pre-IND meetings where we've submitted, the data that we have, and we got, positive or supportive feedback from the FDA. But yeah, so this is a clinical and commercial grade manufacturing facility.
Yeah, I asked that question in part because some of the, so often when we think about genetic medicine, we think like rare disease, ultra rare disease.
Yeah.
Some of the indications that you guys are looking at are not so rare, certainly not ultra rare.
Yeah.
So it seems to me there's a different sort of capacity requirement potentially as you move the product through the clinic.
We certainly have the capacity to do the upcoming clinical trials. But as those programs progress and as our partners programs progress, I hope we'll be in a situation that we need to expand our facility. We have the capability to expand our facility in our current footprint. That would be a wonderful situation to be in. But yeah, so you were talking about like indications.
Yeah.
We purposely picked indications that would, well, first of all, that have an unmet need that we think we can help these patients. That's first and foremost. But we selected them to be kind of bookends. So to your point, in gene therapy, a lot of the traditional programs are in pediatrics, ultra rare or small diseases. So the STXBP1 program is certainly not ultra rare, but it is considered rare. It's about 5,000 patients in the US and Europe. But and in pediatric population. That's kind of the traditional place gene therapies have played. And on the other end, we selected Parkinson's GBA, adult population, neurodegeneration, bigger patient population, about 300,000 patients in the US and Europe. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to show the bookends of what's possible with our capsids, with our cargo optimization capabilities, everything. And so that's why we picked those two as the lead programs. And it also, to your point, showcases what's possible on the manufacturing side too, to be able to accommodate both of those adult patients that require more and broader populations, as well as, the rare condition in a younger patient population. So I think those indications, besides being best in class to help patients who are desperately suffering, also are a great showcase of what's possible through our technology.
Yeah. We talked a bit about the investment community and its appetite for genetic therapies.
Yeah.
Like I said, given that so much of the nucleus of activity in this space has been in ultra rare, what's different? Sort of compare and contrast for me. What's different in terms of your approach to the partner and investment community in broader indications than what these small, like ultra rare indication developers are experiencing. Is there a difference? I mean,
Well, so we've had a receptive audience from the investment community, just like we have from the pharma community, because again, we're doing things, we're solving problems that exist. And certainly just like pharma companies, some are into rare diseases, some are not, some are into broader diseases. There's investors that have a thesis in each camp. And so, everybody, they have to be focused on where they invest, so they can't invest in everything.
sure.
But it's been a receptive conversation. I think, even the rare disorders, I mean, look at a company like Sarepta and the success they've had. I just saw that they announced that they're performing ahead of their plan in the commercial uptake of their product. All that creates great momentum for the types of things we do.
Mm-hmm.
And while there have been challenges in CNS, not in CNS, in gene therapy on the commercialization side, in the CNS part of gene therapy, there's been some good successes with, Avexis, now Novartis, and Zolgensma, and Sarepta, and what they're doing with Elvetis. And we think we're going to have similar success, even in the rare population, and certainly in the broader population with the neurodegeneration program.
Yeah. Yeah. You've talked a bit about what Capsida is doing to change the paradigm in gene therapy, and you bear a responsibility to do that, apparently. What do you see across the greater landscape? Like what does the rest of I don't mean to, make it an us versus them kind of thing, but from your perspective, what does the rest of the field need to do to bring gene therapy back to the development stage that it needs to be at, right?
Yeah, I think the field needs to be more selective about, what indications we're pursuing, what technology use. Like I said, certain diseases, it's perfectly fine to use AAV-based therapies because you can easily get to certain tissues. But for those, more difficult tissues to get to, like the brain, and like many other organs, I mean, the kidney has biological barriers, the lung has biological barriers, the eye has biological barriers. So just being, smart about the indications, being smart about the delivery technology that's being used, and then of course cargo and things like that. But I really think that. Again, I'm quite hopeful that with some of the successes that are happening, particularly in some of the CNS gene therapies that I mentioned, but also the progress we're making, and quite frankly, others are making as well, I think will help, I hope, but I think will help to restore some of the momentum and enthusiasm. Because at the end of the day, it's undeniable the benefit that gene therapies can have for patients if they're done right. I mean, if you have a clear genetic cause of a disease, and you can fix that genetic cause, whether it be through a gene therapy or, a gene editing approach. Those are disease modifying and possibly curative. So the power is undeniable. These aren't symptomatic treatments, in our Parkinson's program. I mean, levodopa is so critical, but eventually it wears out. I mean, it's a symptomatic treatment. What we're trying to do is alter the course of the Parkinson's caused by the GBA mutation. That's just so powerful. And I think there's a lot of companies that understand that. That's why there's many that are still quite engaged in gene therapy. And there's a lot of investors that see that. So then it's incumbent upon us and others to deliver on that promise. And then that's why we exist.
Yeah. Yeah. What is the greater gene therapy landscape in CNS disorders look like? Is it a competitive space? Do you find a lot of people working there, or people moving toward CNS?
Yeah, I think there are people working in it, certainly. I think, again, the unmet need, the problems that exist are undeniable. So it's certainly attracted some interest. I'm quite proud of where we're at, and the programs that we have are all the potential to be best in class. Again, we're about to be in the clinic. And so, I'm a believer, like I think competition brings the best out of people. I don't fear competition. That's, the old saying is the best thing that ever happened to Coke was Pepsi. And so there is something about having, all boats rise when a couple of members are in a category. and are working together, maybe not together, but are working towards solve problems, it just brings a little bit of vigilance and a little extra something from all of us. But I wish, anybody who's in this space, I want the whole field to succeed, because again, it'll bring momentum back to the field. It'll bring more investors in. It'll bring even more pharma companies in, and ultimately it'll just help more patients. So that's how I kind of think about the competition in the field.
Yeah. Give us a snapshot of where Capsida is today in terms of that march toward the clinic.
Yeah. So, we're very much in execution mode to get ready for our IND filings. We've done all the IND enabling work that needs to be done for those two programs. We've had pre-IND meetings with the FDA. We've done dose range finding studies. We've dosed our GLP tox studies. And we've done manufacturing scale up for one of the programs, or almost done with the other. So now we're just waiting for the final results of those studies. And then we'll package those INDs both in the first half of this year. And in parallel, we're preparing for the clinic. So we have a great chief medical officer who's hired a great team, and also a network of CROs and outside consultants that are busy talking to sites and getting those sites up and ready. We don't want to start that process after the IND is approved.
Right.
We started that process months ago so that we're ready as soon as the IND is approved, that we can start planning for the first patients to get treated. So that's what our focus has been. The company's been around 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
This has been and actually the people at Caltech were working on for many years before. This is the culmination of the work that's gone on for many years, is to get to this point to help patients.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always interesting to me to have a conversation around sort of that metering of the shape shifting of the growth of the hires, pre-IND. We need to put a clinical team into place. There's all this risk involved in that, right? Like planning for the next step and building for the next step. Give us some insight, advice, if you will, to aspiring biotech builders on that element of it, like obviating for the next step, being a step ahead, and embracing the risk of being ready for the next step.
Yeah, I think you have to have the passion for building, and you have to have the tolerance for risk, and you have to understand that innovation is not a straight line. It's usually like this. But as long as you're heading upward, then you're doing well. But we're all fooling ourselves if we think it's going to be a completely straight line, no setbacks. That's just not reality. So I think it's a mindset that someone needs to have. You were asking about my career earlier. Even though it was a little bit different, it was the same kind of experience that I had at Lundbeck. So when we were building and taking on risks of developing products, licensing products, buying companies, all of those take risk. All of those have setbacks. You're building new capabilities. You have SOPs, you make some mistakes and you learn from those mistakes. It's all, very similar as, the capabilities we're building, building a clinical or regulatory team, building, moving from, a new phase of manufacturing, moving into the GMP scale. All of those are exciting, fun. There's challenges you run into that you have to overcome. And I think you have to be ready for that ride. And then the other thing I would say is, especially as a CEO, sometimes people expect the CEO to be an expert at everything. Yeah. I personally think the best CEOs are those that understand what they're expert at, and hire people who are expert at the things that they're not, and creating a clear strategy, creating a clear set of objectives and goals that they hold people accountable towards delivering, inspecting on what's happening, but at the same time, and holding people accountable, but at the same time, giving people the latitude to exert the expertise you hired them for.
Yeah.
And also, as a CEO, to, be the biggest champion, storyteller of the company, chief fundraiser, all of those things. So for those who are interested in, a career as or aspire to become a biotech CEO, I think those are some of the thoughts I would share.
Yeah, no, they're all good thoughts. Now level with us and tell us what's not fun.
Well, inevitable setbacks are not fun. The funding environment hasn't been fun, even though we've navigated it well. We're a 5-year-old company, and still the only equity round we raised was the original Series A. All the rest of the funding has come through pharma partnering, and we've been very successful at that. But not having the kind of momentum in the macroeconomic environment in kind of biotech, or the momentum behind genetic medicines and gene therapy, those things haven't been fun.
Right.
But we've navigated through that.
Yeah. So what's on the agenda here at JP Morgan 25? And it's an interesting question to ask because, there's the obvious. Well, I'm here to meet with investors and find partners. But there's obviously nuance in the response that I get to that question. So specific to Capsida, what are you doing?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, we have a speaking slot at the conference, which is great.
Yeah.
And so it's, this is the biggest meeting of the year, and kicks off the year, and it couldn't be better timing for us because of the transition we're about to make from, preclinical to clinical. And it really is that transition, in addition to the presentation, that we're communicating here to pharma companies, to investors, about the progress that we made and getting these lead programs on the cusp of being in the clinic and treating patients. So it's mostly awareness building around the progress. We've always maintained and worked hard to maintain relationships with pharma companies, investors, et cetera, and make sure that they know what we're up to and the progress that we're making. I'm a big believer that you don't just show up to somebody when you're looking for something, whether it be a partnership or an investment. I think, telling our story, building awareness, creating a base of knowledge for those communities of what we're up to just makes it so much more easy when there is something specific or tangible that you're working on, whether it be with pharma companies or with investors. So it's mostly awareness building about, as you used, a phase shift, that the pretty significant one we're about to embark on.
Yeah, very cool. I want to ask another question about the meeting, the JPM meeting, right? Yeah. I was just having a conversation about this with a colleague of mine, and I've sat in on a number of them, and I see what happens on stage. And we were just having a sort of a speculative conversation about how important what happens off stage might be. So I'm curious if you can give our listeners some insight into the mechanics of that meeting. So I'm assuming you'll be presenting?
Yeah, I'll be presenting.
You'll be presenting. Now, did you bring, so you'll present, you'll do the pitch deck. You'll hope that you got all the right points, right? Like a lot of prep that goes into that.
Yes.
Now, did you bring like a support team? You got some more scientists, I call them propeller head folks who are going to, kind of take questions off stage. Like, what does that kind of look like?
Yes. So the short answer is yes. Our chief medical officer, our chief technology officer, and our chief research and innovation officer, as well as other members of the leadership team will be there. But they'll be part of the Q&A at the end. Mm-hmm. But it's interesting when you say off stage. My time on stage is total of 25 minutes, and we're here for 5 days.
Right.
So most of the action, for us, but almost everybody, is not even related to the specific conference. Yeah. It's the magnet, the conference that has attracted all these people that are here. So it's really outside of the conference that we're having, this conversation, talking to pharma companies, talking to investors, meeting with our current partners. We have the partnerships with AbbVie, Lilly, and CRISPR. So we're taking advantage of the fact that we're here and working with them, meeting with them, update on the programs, the progress, meeting with our own, investors. Mm-hmm. Since we're all in the same place, it's an opportunity to make sure to communicate, stay connected with our current investors. So it's that's how we're spending our time. And again, I think for everybody, most of the action's outside the conference.
Yeah, for sure. Yes, Stefan earlier talked about how it's like an 8 to 11 day. That's probably conservative.
Yeah, certainly it was yesterday. I mean, first night with all the receptions that most people have. A little quieter tonight, but busy all day long, and busy all day long tomorrow as well.
Yeah,
and then Thursday, and then kind of in the afternoon on Thursday, I guess. If I had hair, I would say I could let my hair down a little bit Thursday afternoon.
Well, I wish you luck in the presentation. That's it's a great achievement, and
Thank you.
I'm sure it'll go swimmingly. And I really do appreciate you taking time out of this super busy week to
Yeah,
spend.
thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, it was fun. I wish you all the best with all your podcasts throughout the year.
Thank you.
All right.
So that is Capsida CEO Peter Anastasiou. I'm Matt Pillar. This is the Business of Biotech JPM edition. We drop every Monday, so we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening.